With that, what I want to do is welcome our next speaker, Hans van der Aa. Hans is the president of SupportPro, which is a division of Duravant. Hans was somebody I got to know a couple of years ago. He came into Duravant to basically set up SupportPro as a standalone division, and he's done a superb job in the last year. I'd let him maybe share a bit about Duravant and his background, and how this notion of growth is coming through an integrated service business at SupportPro. So without further ado, Hans, over to you.
Hello, good afternoon, good morning to Stilstan, good evening. Thanks, Vivek, for inviting me and to get this opportunity to speak also on behalf of Duravant and SupportPro. We'll dive into that in a minute. First, wanted to say that it's been a very engaging session so far. I've really been enjoying what Dave and Adrian have brought here to the table. As a matter of fact, I was considering just to change all my slides and actually tag on to some of the topics that they have been speaking to, because I think it's a lot of that is what we are talking about every single day. On my story here, I want to first create the picture of where SupportPro is coming from, and what the roadmap is that we are taking, and then tie it back into some of the topics that we heard earlier today. And then we'll just see if there's some further questions to it. Let's go there. So Duravant is a fairly young company. It's a global automation equipment company, to the point where Adrian was referring to earlier. Obviously, hardware-based initially, and we are definitely going through some of the challenges as we're pointing out earlier. We do have a broad portfolio of products, services, integrated solutions, you name it, and we're a global player in that context. I forgot to just first introduce myself. I actually joined Duravant a little bit over, close to about 2 years ago, and heading on the SupportPro activities, and we'll come back to that a little bit more in detail. My previous background actually was capital equipment in the electronics industry. I spent about 25 years in that industry, covered Europe, Asia, and the Americas. And in that sense, if I look back to the comment that Adrian made earlier in terms of factories lights out, as a matter of fact, in my last company, ASM Assembly Systems, we were actually working on some projects where customers were really targeting that goal of having minimal amount of operators running around on the factory floor in between the machines, and actually setting up complete remote cockpits inside factories in order to control those activities. So from what I've seen there, we're definitely, from a technology standpoint, we're moving towards a further automated environment, and a lot of the things that we're looking at are capable and possible nowadays. So I'm originally from the Netherlands, and as I said, I worked all over the world. I did not pick up to learn Chinese, even though I spent about 10 years in Hong Kong. Too busy, that's my big excuse here. But that having said, let's go back to where this is all about. So Duravant, we usually look at things like in our segment, food and beverage, customer industrial goods, agriculture, e-commerce, and logistics. And that's basically where we are focused on. And as a company looking at these things, we split up our segments in three: food processing, packaging equipment, and material handling. SupportPro is the entity that is really covering all those segments and working together with all these operating companies that are listed here in order to provide all the aftermarket solutions, services, spare parts, value-add solutions, anything in that area is covered by SupportPro. Just a little bit of history. Like I said, Duravant is a fairly young company. It was established in 2013 by the acquisition of Fishbein. It was rebranded into Duravant the year after. And what you can see here, we are a private equity-owned company. We are a growth company. And basically, the strategy here is to further enhance our portfolio of solutions towards our customers in the three segments that I pointed out. And we also see a lot of cross-functional usage across those segments. So we see products that are typically associated with material handling, like conveyor systems, obviously also being used in some of the packaging plants. And therefore, there's a lot of interaction between our different operating companies. If we talk about servicing but also selling solutions to our customers. So we've done multiple acquisitions every year up till this point, and even last year in a very difficult year, we'll come back to that in a bit about COVID. We still had 3 acquisitions, of which cloud packaging in the Chicagoland area was the last one. We closed just before the year end. And I just wanted to talk about this piece here because if you look at it, when they started the initiative around SupportPro, and as a matter of fact, my predecessor, Kurt Hulsman, who really started off this initiative, he's on the call today. So Kurt, great to see you in the audience. So basically, I was proud to be able to take it over from him to start further developing this whole concept of an aftermarket service network across all these companies that we're looking at here. And the big challenge here, and again, I've worked in different aftermarket type models in my previous companies, but the big challenge here is that if you look at all these independent operating companies, we still feel where it's important for them to have their own entity, to be able to make their own decisions, to have a very decentralized structure of the way we are going about our business. But at the same time, you want to have that coverage. You want to have the ability to connect all your service activities as a common thread throughout all that as a network. So the challenge also here is that when we going forward acquire the next company and the next and the next, each and every one of them will have something like a service organization set up to support aftermarket. Some of them are more necessity based. It's like, okay, yeah, the customer called, I need to send out a tech. So they have some people, sometimes even assembly people from the factory floor that are being sent out. Some of them have full-blown, grown, matured service organizations. So that's the challenge that myself and my team were always faced with in terms of how to further embed that, incorporate that into our structure. So the goal for us is to really build an infrastructure that we are capable and almost like a modular setup where we're capable of very quickly embedding the next, family member that we are welcoming into our vault here. So just to talk about that part, some of the success factors to do that is, and this is something that I've learned throughout my whole career, is that it is really, really critical to treat aftermarket as a true business. So not just as a necessity, not just as, okay, well, we need to get some spare parts shipped out to our customers. So how do we accomplish this? But in order to be able to really be successful in this area and grow that as an important piece of our total business, Adrian had some very interesting graphs where you could see the importance also from a profitability standpoint. But we see it as it's important to treat it this way and to have it championed at the executive level. So therefore, I'm part of the Duravant leadership team, and that's one of the things I think is the right way of going about this for a company. The other piece here is to truly establish a dedicated service organization. So as I said before, when we acquire a company, sometimes there is a mix between factory technicians going out on service calls. And of course, we have to be flexible. We sometimes need the knowledge, sometimes we need the capacity. So we will never shy away from using that opportunity. But at the same time, it has proven that it's important to have a dedicated service organization and to really, truly optimize both your talent as also your management decisions based upon delivering that service to your customers. In my time in Asia, especially in China, I became to realize that even from a talent and personal perspective, that factory workers versus people in the field, there are different breeds there. If you take a very good service technician and you put him onto a factory floor and you ask him to make 100 modules a day of the same type according to a certain process, he will start reinventing that from as of day one, because that's in his DNA. He's a MacGyver type person. If some people of my generation still remember that TV show. So having that dedication here allows us to really tailor and to build the right setup. Another piece, of course, again, we are dealing with all these different groups, different companies, different locations around the world. So for us, it's very, very key to always listen and look at where are our best practices and how can we set our standards for service delivery. So on one hand, we set our standards. On the other hand, if somebody has a good idea, let's take a look at it and see how we can bring it across and use it for the other operation groups. That having said, of course, then a common infrastructure is critical. And I think the investments we're making currently, for instance, with companies like Entitle, are part of that to basically make sure that the infrastructure is a common infrastructure. And again, to have that almost pluggable type base and platform available for any new entry into our family to be able to quickly fit in and to start working with us. Another area which is proven to be very critical is if you look at metrics. So how do we measure performance? Earlier we were talking with the discussion with Dave about performance for people, but just in general, if we talk about utilization of a field technician, or how do you measure that? Because if everybody measures it in a slightly different way, what do we learn from it? If we're able to measure this in a consistent way across the group, then we can start looking at the data. And it doesn't mean that it all has to be in the same levels, because there's always local or regional type differences, there are customer differences, segment differences. But as long as we can compare and analyze, we can learn, and that helps us to be able to optimize. And sometimes I actually should start with this one, but in the end, and it's a no-brainer, but it's really critical, and quite often we forget. We really have to make doing business with us as simply as we can for our customers. I think nowadays with how in our personal lives we're using the Amazon apps and other things, we go on our phone. If it doesn't work the first time, we toss it aside. We go for something else or something that works better. So the more complex we make it for our customers to do business with us, the more negatively it's affecting us in order to be able to retain them for future business, or to, for instance, sell additional equipment to them from our other companies. So this is a prime focus point for us. And of course, if you look at the different groups, we really want to take advantage of having our resources and having the different resources and use that coverage that we therefore basically inherit to our advantage. So I'll just give an example to that. So we have a company in Taunton, Massachusetts. It's called Olson Packaging. And they basically, from the original when they were acquired, were Taunton-based. They had remote technicians somewhere in Pennsylvania. And everybody else basically is factory-based. So just fly out of the factory all over the place in order to support their customers. We also have a company in Spain, Barcelona. Also a lot of factory-based technicians. They have a few more remote field technicians located. They have another company based out of India. But again, they have customers in North America, in the US. So how to support those customers basically out of those very, very remote locations from that perspective. We do have operating companies, obviously more in the US as well. Hamer Fishbein, for instance, based out of Minneapolis, near Minneapolis in Minnesota. And they have a little bit more remote people around in the US. But again, by themselves, it's still a kind of a limited approach. In my days when I was selling equipment as an equipment salesperson, these were not the most comfortable charts that you would try to convince the customer, for instance, in Europe, to start considering using equipment, because how are you going to support it? That's the first question they're going to ask me. So looking at SupportPro, when we started this initiative to pull that network together, basically all these dots and all these locations could be combined. And today, and I actually have to update this again because this keeps changing. We're hiring. SupportPro has about 150 service techs in the Americas, another 60 in Europe, and about 20 in Asia Pacific. So we really are, our strong base obviously is on the Americas side. We're growing fast in Europe, and Asia is next on our list in terms of further developing. In addition to that, we're still working with a very large pool of subcontractors to complement and to really work with us and in order to manage the capacity and being able to deliver the services we need for the customers at the time that we need it. So then we were on our way to further strengthen this structure, to work on Europe especially, and to further build out and to work on all these elements that I was mentioning earlier. And then all of a sudden, we all got confronted with COVID-19. So to that point, I really like what Dave was sharing earlier in terms of the earlier days in Honeywell in order to how to work through the recessions and other things, because that's literally what we have done. We probably, our leadership here has probably read a lot of good things about this, but basically, instead of starting to lay off people, we really looked at solutions and furloughing and all sorts of measures to basically trim our costs down to the bare minimum and to see and wait and see how we could get through this period and start looking at when do we have visibility of how the business will develop on the long term, or let's say the midterm. So basically, we kept operational in all our manufacturing facilities. All of our businesses are deemed to be essential. We assured the operation. We put all our protocols in place. We made sure that we are taking care of our health and safety of our staff plus our customers. We make sure, even up till today, every time we go to a customer, we reach out to them and we check out, what are your procedures on the COVID side? What is your current, short-term history, etc., just to make sure that we know what we're walking into. Obviously, screening methods in place in all our facilities, and obviously the personal protection equipment for all our staff, including our field service techs, in order to be able to operate as safe and healthy as possible. So by doing all this and by the way we are cooperating and sharing our resources, one of the key things there is we really try to trim down on air travel, at some point almost to zero. So by using basically field service technicians that were already locally available in certain states, even though they were not originally trained yet for that piece of equipment, we started cooperating with our customers, with our operating companies, and basically help with remote support, have other technicians basically to be able to go on site and get jobs done. Now, they're not done in the way that we really would like to deliver our service, because we really want to have everybody factory trained and capable of doing this. But in the choice between doing completely nothing versus having this type of solutions available in full transparency with our customers, we've really been able to build good relationships with our customers and being able to address a lot of their service needs that they had. And the result of that is something I can show here in terms of if you look at our service execution. So we definitely saw a huge trail down up till April. And another piece here is that out of the 13 operating companies, some of them were harder hit than others. Actually, one of them was actually going faster than everybody else because they're in the material handling space on the e-commerce side. And that started taking off like crazy. So we were able to really utilize our resources across the groups in order to shift basically the resources towards where the activities were. And by doing this consistently throughout and managing this actually on a daily basis, every day we're managing all this 230 technicians worldwide, basically with all the groups together. Every day we're on a call to make sure that everybody gets a job. This is basically what we are able to accomplish in terms of our service executions. And I'm very proud to say, and being proud to be the person leading this team, is that in 2019, we had a record year in terms of growing our aftermarket. And in 2020, we actually are beating that. And that has to do with the way we have been able to cover this, to go into basically the mode of low cost, try to get through it, put the right things in place, but retain the talent and retain the capacity of us to as soon as customers were starting to open back up and started to run again, and they needed support, we were able to deliver. It's not easy, but that's what we love doing. So just to kind of summarize that in a way, if you look at our ambitions and the tools we are looking into and we are investing into in terms of to support that, everything comes down in aftermarket is, you want to have a high customer satisfaction. To the point Dave brought up, I think in the beginning also with his book, is that winning the next deal itself is not the goal. It's really winning that customer, getting the next business, and be a true partner for them to continue working with them. So for us, there's a high focus on basically how do we measure that? How do we make sure that we're on top of things? That if things start sliding and you have so many customers around, so many people, always something happens. But how are we able to consistently capture that and to have a follow through and to be able to go back to those customers to repair what needs to be repaired and work on those relationships. Another piece here is we do have the ambition to have all our technicians trained from a factory, and that's something that because of COVID and all the restrictions that we had to take into account, this has been a challenge. So we're working through different solutions of still accomplishing that same goal. All that leads basically towards ambitions to be a trusted partner with our customers. And not only in terms of like, hey, if we speak, they listen and they take our advice blindly, but it's really truly about what we promise, what we can deliver. And also in terms of responsiveness. So one of the things with the coverage that I talked about earlier is that instead of having to fly somebody out of Massachusetts to California, we have service techs in California. So if we have them trained up to do that same work, our responsiveness all of a sudden improves dramatically. And we're able to basically even combine that with what we call courtesy visits. So when we visit a customer for one of our operating companies, and next door there's another customer, and I have 3 hours of time left in the day of this technician, why not pop in and do a courtesy visit? Obviously, all in regulations with whatever COVID restrictions we are dealing with today, but being able to continuously build those relationships with our customers. I already spoke earlier about ease to do business with, looking at things as a one-stop shop, etc. Again, if you look at 13 operating companies today, and who knows, next week there's another one. One of the things for SupportPro is to really become the ability towards customers to have one-stop shop. They're still dealing with the operating companies that we are representing, that we are working with, but being able to basically reach out to us directly, and therefore we will take care, make sure that the right people address things back with them. The same, I think, if you look at things like e-learning, knowledge accessibility, I think to the point where we're talking about earlier about when you hire people, I always tell my guys is that I always look for two elements. If you look at a field technician or a technical support specialist, etc., is two main capabilities: the ability to quickly learn technical knowledge and to apply, and a good attitude. If one of those areas are missing, it's not a good candidate for that type of role. So in that respect, nowadays, with the new technologies going so fast, new machines popping up for us in the way we are growing as a company, we really have to use different ways of getting that knowledge across to our people, because we can't bring them in to every single training center to get trained on every piece of equipment. So it's a lot of things there that are changing, and we need technology to support us in order to do that. Obviously, we always have to deliver on our commitments, so that will always continuously be a prime focus in terms of being able to ship the parts, get them out there on time. What we promise, that's what we meet, etc. And I think everything else is starting to gear more towards becoming more proactive. So we're talking about things like predictive maintenance. We talked earlier about remote support, monitoring. All these kind of facets are being applied and looked at, and we're basically investing into what are the right technologies for us in order to take the next steps in these areas. And I totally agree with Adrian's predictions, maybe not exactly to the percentages, but in terms of that, we definitely see that the future growth will come more out of those advanced services supported by the new technologies, etc. And that's a lot of the things are gearing towards that direction. And this is where we chose for currently 4 of our operating companies to work with Entitle, and we're really excited about what the tools are bringing for us. Also on the other side, on the CRM side, we have chosen to standardize because we had to make a choice whether on the ERP systems or on the CRM systems, which one is the better one to look at, unless you want to do both. But if you're in a growth model in this type of industries, basically any new company you acquire might already have solutions in place. So ERP systems and conversions of those into one standard, those are very, very complicated and very expensive processes to run through. So our choice has been to work with one common CRM platform. We are using Field Service Lightning from Salesforce to basically really manage and to have the knowledge available of all our service technicians out there and every activity we're doing, what spare parts quotes are out, etc., etc. So the next steps will be is to further enhance this toolkit for us in order to integrate it further with remote monitoring, machine connectivities, and start building services and obviously look at the monetization of those services towards our customers. So one of my previous bosses always had a comment, there's never a dull moment, and this is just a very small subset of some of the equipment that our various operating companies are building and designing, and that's basically what we have to service every single day. So with that having said, so a common thread is all our companies combined, and like I said, I have to update this picture every couple of weeks. Is that for SupportPro, we're connecting all our operating companies together. We have customers that are, customer of multiple of them. So we try to be that common interface, and we really truly try to find the right balance between, a kind of a centralization versus decentralization in terms of decision-making processes, and being able to have that uniqueness still in place that all these brands have built up over time in the way they have grown. But at the same time, give them the assurance of Duravant and SupportPro that we are being covered against a common standard that we are setting, and that bar is rising every day. So that's the story I had to share with you today. I look at timing. Vivek, I'm sorry, I think I've run a little longer. I'm not sure if we have time left for any questions.
No, I think, first of all, thank you very much for that. That was a very interesting story. And I think we'll try to take one question at least. We had a few more, but there's one from Graham Robertson, who's on the phone, or who's on the webinar. He basically asked the question of, given the current market conditions and the COVID challenges, how important has it been for you to have local service centers near your install base? And I think you kind of sort of answered it, but maybe you can give a bit more specific examples of that. Is it getting more important or less? There's a couple more questions, but in the interest of time, let's start with Graham's question.
Yes, it has become extremely important. And COVID has just kind of elevated that necessity, even beyond the level that we initially intended to look at. So the initial set out was with SupportPro to start using the coverage to be able to actually promise any customer we're dealing with that we have local support available and we're able to support them. Everybody feels more comfortable if they know, that within 1 or 2 or 3 hours drive, there is a technician that can come out to help them. And then the other piece of that was obviously also, if you look at, the cost it is to deliver services. If we can avoid air travel, if we can just have local technicians go around, cover a couple of different customers in a day, it really helps us to manage the cost of delivering that service. And then the third point of our initial goals here was a better work-life balance. If you look at the older generations, people were used to be road warriors, to be on the road for weeks on end. Nowadays, a lot of the younger people that at least that I know and I deal with, they like to have a good work-life balance. They want to be able to be home at night, or at least every other night, and be able to have a family. So by giving them the opportunity to work in their territory around their home base, it really helps us to be able to offer a better work-life balance towards our technicians, but also when we're trying to hire people, etc. Now with COVID, and again this morning I was on my call with the European companies. The UK is completely shut down right now. So luckily we have multiple technicians in the UK, but for instance, we need to get support in from some of our US companies, and that's currently just not possible. So therefore, all of a sudden you see that you have to build up that local presence. You need to have that knowledge. And, right now, a lot of our focus is about, okay, how can we utilize a technician that is, that has the right capabilities from a learning perspective and the attitude, but he's lacking the knowledge and the experience. So how do we do this? How can we support him? And going forward, I hope in a year from now, we don't have that same issue with at least those particular machines or those particular customers, because we do have that capability trained up. Here in the US, also, for instance, if you go into Canada, the same things. When you go into Canada right now, you need to be quarantined. Well, who's going to pay for the quarantine time? That's basically a lost capacity piece there for 2 weeks. A technician is out of the running because he's sitting in a hotel waiting out his time in order to go on site with customers. So COVID has really kind of stretched, I think, the abilities that companies have to deal with it. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, that's great. I really appreciate it, Hans. And I think what you said at the end is really critical. And in the interest of time, I think we'll try to wrap it up there. But the main thing that I took away from this is, there's always this balance of battle as we talked with Dave Cody about early on about winning now versus winning later, right? The whole balance between centralization versus decentralization, having things in the operating companies. But I think as an enterprise, SupportPro has been able to build together what I would say capabilities and capacity by this integration that you wouldn't have been able to achieve for each operating company independently. I think that's probably one big thing that I took away out of this one, right? So,
Right. Yes, that's right.
excellent. Well, listen, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Hans, for your time today. This was really good. I think it was, again, there's always lessons to be learned for everybody out here. So thanks for your time.